It's so exciting. My emotions are revved up for this
Mine too.
conversation about emotion.
Yes. Yes. I don't know how we got here. I have a sense of how we got to the emotional
From
piece.
anger.
That's right. Well, I know we dealt with anger last week. Um, but it feels like emotion is really central to
Yes.
everything we talk about in know and sell pointers.
Yes.
Um, but it's almost deeper, going deeper because it's deeper than strategy. It's deeper than personality styles. It's just what is at the heart, the core of why someone buys and why that person may be the right person to sell or message to. So it's really feels like a real deep central topic.
Yeah, it is core. There is a common expression that people buy emotionally and then justify with reason.
Right.
But the truth is that there is emotion underlying every buying decision. And the emotion is, of course, we think it's going to put us in a better position than we are now. Otherwise, we wouldn't be going forward.
Right. Right. And and I think that that's something to dive into a little bit today. We like to give people tips on selling and messaging. So let's start with a sales tip tied to emotion, Nancy, if you would.
Ooh, caught me off guard. So let me think. What's a sales tip tied to emotion? Well, the first is that you need to bring out and find the emotional hot button of your prospect. And there is a hot button, even if it's that number 8 style, which is dedicated to reason and knowledge and information and research, and they want the scientific evidence. There, there is an emotion behind it, and that emotion is that I can somehow trust. And I'm using trust now as an emotion. I can trust data and objective information more than I can trust subjective feelings. So there is emotion behind every buying decision, and it's our job to find and pull to the surface that emotion. What's your take on it?
Well, I like the idea that it's up to us to pull the emotion. I was thinking of something like because with personal branding, um, I find myself putting the emphasis on personal. Wanting to go deep with clients, wanting them to dig deep, and that often opens up themselves to being vulnerable to deep emotions. And there's a risk, in, if you will, in going so deep into their emotion that they are emotionally driven in everything they do with their business. So now they feel like they're being so honest and being so authentic that they're going to share about everything. They're going to tell the truth. They're going to go, right to the wall with everything that they've got. And I think that there's a risk there of the emotionality being overwhelming and overwhelming that rational, practical side.
You know, Emotion per se does not have to be overwhelming when it's processed. And what you're creating in my mind is, the thought that if somebody is getting maybe overwhelmed by the emotion, then they haven't really processed it and uh,
Mm,
digested it. It's kind of like taking in nutrients that haven't yet been metabolized. And, you can't get iron by sucking on a rusty nail. You really need
right.
to. You need it to come from spinach. Now, the spinach can get the iron from the rusty nail, but I can't. And so there has to be that in between step where there is, that processing, the metabolism, which is what I think, Hirsch, you help people do when they meet with you. So you don't just help them, put it all on the table and they feel vulnerable and naked. You're actually helping them work through and find what are the gems here in all of this stuff.
Yeah. Well, thank you. But I think you nailed it with process. I think the idea that these are things that need time to
Yes.
absorb, to process, and to find their place is really the key. Because,
Oh,
yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry to
No,
interrupt,
no,
but
please.
when the person has processed it and digested it, you are now in the position to be an amazing resource to another person who hasn't gotten that yet. And
Yeah.
when you think about it, isn't that what so many of us are giving our clients? It's the fact that we've been there. It was something that happened to us some time ago. We have gone beyond it. And now we can look back with some wisdom and understanding and help you walk through a process that leads to your metabolism, your absorption, and therefore your brilliance regarding that topic.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Um, Now, what about the type that isn't easily given to emotion, that really separates the business decisions, the practical? I guess we're talking, in terms of your system, maybe a six,
The
uh,
age.
to an extent, the eight,
Hmm.
but people who do not reveal emotion typically, uh, and that can run deep. What are your thoughts on those personalities?
Well, again, many times people are trying to, they feel vulnerable when they identify and recognize and speak their emotions. So the six is a very reserved, formal person. They don't like to show emotion, even warmth, friendliness until they get to know you. And so there has to be that period of time where they move towards a more formal relationship to a more casual, friendly relationship. Our number eight is one who totally is into the head, very intellectual, and often emotions are something that they work to contain and keep away because, again, they're so wedded to rationality. But that when I say wedded to rationality, guess what? That's emotion. You see, the fact that they are wedded to something and they're afraid to become divorced. You know what I'm saying?
Right, right.
So they try to contain it. And what I find is that many times, again, it's because the person is not processing material from their life, and hence they wall it off, they put it in a container thinking that's going to somehow keep them from it. But instead those containers become like a brick wall, like, one brick at a time I've walled off. And then guess what? I'm not accessing the very substance of what I am brilliant at, that I might be able to give to you and help you on your path because I've built this brick wall.
Yeah, yeah. It's a delicate dance that we do with all the tools at our disposal, and that's how I think we want our viewers to look at these things. These are tools. There's a lot of psychology in what we talk about. You are a psychologist. I'm an amateur
You,
psychologist, a
yes, yes.
therapist. Um, but honestly, I think that these are tools. What we're talking about here in Know and Sell Pointers, if you look at everything we talk about and dive into and discuss, from AI to anger to emotions to persuasion to selling the truth, are all tools. They're all arrows in your quiver. And I think the more arrows that you have, the more things you master, the better your chances of not only succeeding in the sell, but also succeeding in the true win and really winning at the game of life and business.
Yeah. I love that sense that, again, each of these things are quivers in our,
Arrows in our
arrows
quiver.
in our quiver, right, and can be used, but the only way you can use them is obviously you have to gain some skill. You can't, if you, I'm not an archerist, and so if you give me a bow and an arrow, I mean, there's a good chance that who knows what's going to happen, right?
Right.
But with some training and with some practice, I will begin to hit the target, and I can hit it with accuracy and eventually even hit the bullseye consistently. Well, that's what we're talking about. All of us have the capacity to do that. It just depends upon where we invest our time, our energy, our resources, whether we see this as a value or not.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that we hope that with no and sell pointers that we're really enhancing that experience for you. And we appreciate the questions and comments, and everybody tuning in. I see you have our No and Sell Insiders logo behind you, Nancy, which is our community. We recognize that not everybody is either in need of or has the capacity for one-on-one counseling, consulting, coaching, and that there's also power in numbers. There's a benefit to being part of a community where questions are asked, questions are answered, and so we've opened that up as something that should hopefully foster a community of people interested in selling the truth, mastering sales, but doing so in a heart-centered way and in a way that feels good.
Right. Right. Well, I feel that there's a lot more we could be discussing about emotion. You asked me about a tip regarding sales. I think next week I'd like to start off by talking about a tip regarding messaging.
Okay.
How does emotion go into messaging? Because again, messaging and sales, it's a continuum, people. These are not separate categories. I know many folks treat them as if they're separate, but to me, it's a flowing river, and there has to be consistency. And the difference is whether that message is hitting 100 ears or at once, or hitting one set of ears at once. That's the only difference in messaging and sales. Who is hearing or receiving your message at the time. So send in your questions. I bet you have a few about emotions. It's a touchy subject.
Yes, that's right.
And
And if you hit a nerve, don't worry, we will respond. We will respond next week. The main difference is that Nancy, I put her on the spot. She had to come up with a tip today, and I have a week to think about it. But I have in mind a tip about emotions and messaging. So I look forward to seeing you again next time. Until then, I'm Hirsch Repun, your personal brand builder.
And Dr. Nancy Zier, the sales whisperer to your sales success.